Hey, watercolor class. So starting on the final part of this process demonstration, the third part 3, just trying to finish this thing up. I've been working from back to front and then saving this kind of, I would say, the most crucial and central image to the watercolor for last. And I'm giving myself the opportunity to go back and maybe make some adjustments once this is painted, but there might not be that many, maybe a little bit more down here. And I've probably gone farther than I need to in terms of the level of detail, but couldn't help myself. And then sometimes images call for it. And this sort of had some interesting detail that I decided I would pursue. There's always a kind of a shorthand way that one can go about working, and this is not it. I mean, I've tried to preserve the liquid aspect of the paint, but it's certainly not shorthand. I mean, this is, kind of gone over and gone over again, and then maybe gone over a third time. So um, definitely on a once over thing. But I thought it would be good just to show you, how far you can potentially develop it if you want to, go in that direction. Certainly, it's not what you'd think of as like a photoreal um, image, but it certainly is kind of conforming to the representational aspect of the original collage, which is here. So I'm just going to work on this trout. I thought that might be interesting because it requires maybe a little, the trees are a little different, the water's a little different, the sky's a little different, and then this fish is a little bit different too, but there's an interesting kind of rainbow, excuse me, a rainbow gradation on the coloration of the fish. And I'm just going to, see what I can come up with that in regards to that, I should say. So that's what I'll start on now. So starting with a kind of a blue, um, yeah, it's just like a dark stripe, you know, a yellow-green stripe, a red stripe, and a blue stripe. So trying to decide which way I want to go. I think I will start with the blue. And I'm just going to lay on some paint. And then if necessary, I can take some of that away. It's not a super saturated paint. And it's a very soft kind of edge on the blue. So before this has a chance to dry, take a little bit of that up. Something like that. And then there's a red. Go for the red. And the blue kind of merges into the red. So I'm just letting them do that. I mean, sometimes you just really don't know what it's going to happen, so you just do it. And then you just have to respond to that. So blue, red, then yellow. Hoping that my paint doesn't migrate too much. And I'm thinking, I can come back and manipulate this too. later, with additional sort of washes of color. Went over my edge a little bit there. Okay, and then finally there's a kind of a blue, it's like a really deep indigo blue, not quite black, along the border here. And once I have all these colors down, I'm just going to try and nurse them a little bit. This weird uh, area on the surface of my painting that doesn't want to take the watercolor, but it looks like it finally did. I got some oil on it or something, oily paw print. There, and a little more blue, a little more of the dark color. Just kind of try to flood it in there. And then I'm going to come back and see if I can't manipulate a little bit. I feel like the yellow is something that needs to be reestablished, and then it'll create more of a greenish, when it interacts with this really deep blue, which is like the deep blue is like a Payne's gray, really. It's not blue, but it's like an indigo blue. So anyway, I'm adding that more yellow, and the yellow is interacting with the deep blue to create kind of a greenish tone. Trying to saturate the colors, knowing that they'll kind of, fade a little bit. Same thing with a red. Try to get a little more red in there. The paper is buckling a little bit, and you don't really have any control over that. It'll flatten when it dries, but it makes the paint run in a certain way, and it's okay. Nothing's perfect. And that I guess that's the thing, one should embrace the imperfectness of the watercolor process. It's very hard to paint perfectly with them. It can be done, but you would slow down, and you would be painting with smaller brushes, and you would just be taking more time. So there's something to be said for the immediacy of just working more directly. So I'm trying to flood more of this Payne's gray in here to get that really dark streak on the top of I guess it would be called the back of the trout. And that's looking more natural. Like I feel like when it dries, it will have more, um, it'll feel somewhat more natural, making this sort of a soft edge. I'm blotting my brush over here just as soon as that's just a control thing when I don't want to have too much water on it. If I don't want to have too much water on it, then I just blot it before I touch it to the paper. So that's looking good. Here I want to soften the red edge. and just coming along so that it kind of goes more subtly into the there. Um, so I'm just going to let that dry for a while, and um, then work on other parts of the painting that I'm able to get to. Just trying to make this edge a little more clean and streamlined. And there's, so I've got some, sometimes you can, if you have paint in an area and you need it somewhere else, you just use it like a palette. So I'm taking some paint off this area to paint in the dark of the eye of the fish. And I'm going to use it also for, there's a little bit of an outline on the eye. That, kind of doing the lip of the fish. And there's a little outline here, just tiny bit. And then I'm gonna kind of break this up a little bit. Kind of got too dark. I want it to be kind of curvy or rounded, so I'm kind of letting the dark paint kind of collect on the edges. Just kind of like a little outline. Make a line where the gills are. So like a couple of those. And then there's the jaw of the fish, kind of like that. So that's at least, some definition there. And then I then I have to wait to come back and do anything with that. And then the fins are more yellow. Now, right now I've got this issue where this is kind of blending nicely, but I have this issue where because of the buckling of the paper, the paint is bleeding. Now, that's kind of up to the individual if you want to kind of let that happen or not. I might take a little bit of this away. Just taking up some of the heavier moisture. And I'll let it dry somewhat naturally, but I just didn't want to have a giant, dark smudge right there. All right, so starting to look okay. This line I want to soften a little bit. And this one I want to soften a little bit, just basically blotting away. You could do that, with a cloth or, yeah. And then some slightly more intense blue over here that I'll add back into the mix. And kind of get that blue more distinct on the back, on the side flank. There. Then this could probably use another layer ultimately. And then of course I have this I want to get dark because all of this is so dark, then this probably needs to be darker to stand out. So I'll have to go back and do that. And then the fins are kind of a pretty intense yellow orange, yellow, I suppose more yellow. So um, I'll just make them yellow now. This one has sort of a couple layers of yellow on it. There. Yeah, I think it's a good idea to layer color. Like a couple, and once again, that's known as glazing. Kind of glazing one color over another to yield a third color. So I'm glazing types of yellow over one another to get somewhat the effect that I want. And I'm noticing there's some kind of highlights that I'm going to lift out. Of the yellow. Okay. Um, Noticing this area has dried a little. Put a little yellow in there. And this fin is yellow. I made it too orange at first, so now I'm just bringing back more yellow. And there's this gray at the border isn't quite dry yet, so I'm using this kind of fuzzy edge to kind of bleed into the fin a little bit. I kind of like that. There, more yellow over here. So I almost have everything covered, that's always something to strive for, is getting surface covered. And I'm hoping that, if I have this kind of under patterning going on, And then I'm hoping that with then with additional kind of the spots on the trout and then additional kind of, you know, accentuation with some of the darker tones that it'll come out favorably. And just glazing in some more yellow over this fin. And then one final yellow area looks to be like this fin over here. And I'm going to do like a little shadow thingy right now on the fin, just so that it stands out a little bit. There. And then using just the dark oops, I'm going to do a thin. This is still wet, so I might want to wait. Yeah, paint's still pretty wet, but why not? Just add some of these guys in here. Um, I'm going to try to control these lines now that they got really thick on me. I want them to be more slender. So I'm just going to try to control them a little bit. I decided it wasn't the best thing to do. So I'm trying to lift a little out. And I can come back later. And these are kind of like ghost marks, so maybe they'll be okay. Come back later. This one appears to be drier, so all right. Now I'm getting a clearer sense of what's happening here, and my feeling is that I just need to go darker, and I might layer some green over here, um, and definitely more dark here, and then I just have to get in and around the face more, and then of course I have my my markings, my dots. Not happy with the how I'm doing the little ridges in the fins. Not sure exactly what to do, but I'm manipulating them a little bit. Just to make them dissolve a little, just because I don't like them. See what happens with that. Okay, so I'm gonna turn the camera off for a little while and then just keep, I don't want the video to be too long, so I'm just gonna keep doing what I'm doing until I get to something that's maybe uniquely different to try to demonstrate on, and then I'll turn it on, turn the camera on again. Okay, so now I've been just working on the patterning, the markings on the trout, and I created this kind of rainbow sequence on the skin, and now I'm making these dots, and I'm trying to coordinate the dots so that they have something, some commonality of the color that's in the actual uh, marking. So here, I'm going to go to some kind of reddish tones, and and it seems to kind of help um, transition the stripes a little bit from one color to the next, from one band to the next. So just a few reds. Very subtle anyway. And that probably will do it. I don't really want to go too overboard with this process. It's a little bit strong. Kind of wish I didn't do the reds. And then fact, I'm going to kind of wash them out. So I didn't really like how they looked. So there, we'll let that dry and just see what happens. So just trying to finish up the spots on the trout. And I kind of washed that area out, just wasn't sure about it, but didn't like how it looked. And then I want to just go a little darker. Now it's just kind of down to more adjustments. So I want to go a little bit darker along this border, just to get extra contrast. trying to make the wash kind of a little gradual. Yeah, that's probably adequate. And then darker here a little bit. So it's kind of in the adjustment phase now, which one could really take a long time at. And then this is probably okay. I feel like there are a few things I wanted to do around here. But, you know, essentially it's okay. Just a little adjustment. And these things can just, the finesse part of this process can just take a long time, but it does make a difference. Just sometimes little tiny marks, adjusting the value correctly. Like this had to be a darker value, so then this would stand out a little bit from the background. Then I have this old submerged car, and that's probably okay. There's an area down here that I feel like is too strong. I'm just gonna kind of rub it a little bit. Just turn it into a shadow. Same here. Rub it a little bit. And then I was just going to make a few more little adjustments along here. Maybe get the interior of the car a little darker. So I'm taking this kind of aqua blue, and then I'm neutralizing it a little bit with some brown. And then I'm going to go in and just get some darker tones in the car so you can kind of see deeper into the car. There, that should dry a little bit more, so it won't be quite so strong. Hopefully. And make it a little bit more murky. Yeah, there's just a little bit of dark by the steering wheel, and then it's going to make the steering wheel slightly darker too. There. And I'm putting some This, I don't like how dark it got, so I'm just putting sort of a wash of white over it, which I don't know about either, but it's gonna spread it out a little bit more. It should be all right. There, and then if I want the water to have more depth to it, you can do things like if you show some kind of surface or texture back there, so there's some kind of stones on the bed, the bed of the floor of the water. So then if I do this sort of thing, then it might look like there's a deeper space there. Very pale. And I'm going to take from this, can take color from other areas and then kind of use it like a palette. And then this foreground area here, just don't know whether they're shells or stones or something, but just some kind of texture. And I think I'm very close to being finished. It's probably good enough. It's still a little dark for me. Taking a little bit up. There, okay. So one final thing that I'm going to do is use some opaque white. So I'm going to get that out. The very last thing I'm going to do is get out some opaque white paint, and I cleaned off my palette. And this, this isn't necessary for everybody's painting, but I just wanted to clean a couple things up. For instance, over here, up here, I didn't like how yellow this was. It's almost too close to the sky. So I'm just going to kind of do a white, sort of a white wash over some of the existing color, just to make it less yellow. The white really dies down a lot, but goes on very white, but it's not going to stay that way. I'm just kind of doing a little extra embellishment with a white, trying to use it just like a watercolor. It'll come out kind of, it's opaque white. It's relatively opaque. We're not, depends on how thick you use it, but it's going to come out just kind of like a sort of a translucent milky glaze, I'm assuming. And I'm just kind of painting around some of the spots. It won't be nearly so noticeable when it dries. There. And then over here too, I didn't quite like this area, so I'm gonna go over it. Just trying to make the color less dominant over there. Just painting around my spots. And then here, this is probably okay over here. I don't really need to do anything. Oh, and then here, you paint a little highlight, the fish's eye. I wanted to go over some of these spots here and make them smaller. Don't even know if this is particularly even picking up much in the camera, but I'm kind of going around some of these things. So I've actually almost like I'm rendering, these marks are almost like I'm rendering scales or something. Like little reflections. Basically, I'm covering over areas that I didn't that I didn't really like very much. Like, trying to create a little shimmer, little sheen with the white. There was at some point in my training, I had this sense that using white was not allowed in watercolor. That was not a purist thing to do, but all through history there are watercolors that have white, that intentionally incorporate white. And I think what the idea is that it's you want to really understand the transparency of the medium before you really go nuts with using white. And then it's okay if you kind of understand that transparency, then it's okay to use a lot of white. Sometimes it's just the ideal thing. There, just a little extra texture in that area. I think I'm mostly done. Ooh, was there one more thing I was going to do? Make this line here less distinct. This is just kind of a coarse shadow that runs along here, but it's maybe too strong. It's a broken line to indicate that the car is covered with little aquatic plants and mollusks and stuff like that because it's been submerged so long. All right, so that's probably good enough. All right, done.